had integrated her experience enough to talk about it and write about it.
Yeah, and I would say that although 20 years is probably a kind of an outside figure for most people, I have heard it estimated by other researchers that it may take something like 7 years in many cases or more to be able to pretty much fully integrate this experience. So it's interesting, Jeffrey, as a kind of contrast. Here a person has an experience, the near-death experience, and it may take place almost in a flash of a second, and yet it takes years and years to sort of work through what was given in that moment, as in mystical experiences where you can have an illuminated insight, within a very short period of time, and then maybe take 30 years to, to write a series of books to try to say what you learned in that particular moment. And that's very much the challenge that a near-death experiencer has to face as well. There's something tremendous that happens that changes psyche and soma in this particular experience, but the working out of all of that information and the living of it in such a way as to live with integrity and to honor the experience, that takes a lot of work. And that's why I would say caution against making too easy an assumption of seeing the light and being enlightened. No, seeing the light is maybe just like the first step, then people really awaken when they see the light, but the real work that they have to do follows the experience. It's not done automatically simply by having it.
Especially, I suppose, in our culture, which tends to be materialistic.
Right.
Ken, we're about to take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thinking Aloud. I'm your host, Jeffrey Mishlove. My guest is Dr. Kenneth Ring, author of Lessons from the Light. Ken, it strikes me that the most intriguing aspect of the near-death experience is what you refer to as the life review process. When people see their lives, not just see, feel, experience in great detail, their whole lives flashing in front of them. And not only their lives, but even how their actions affect other people. It's as if they feel the emotions of the people who've been touched by them.
Well, not as if they do. I think this is one of the most remarkable aspects of a near-death experience, and it's one that's not really given the amount of attention that it should. Obviously, many people know about the light, they know about the out-of-body experience, but the thing that really is, I think, important about the near-death experience and in regard to the life review phenomenon is it isn't just a life review. It's a reliving of your life. And when people describe this, it's not always done in this way, but when people describe the full experience, it's every single act that you have done, every single thought that you have thought, every single word that you have spoken. Suddenly, all of this is back with you. You are running through it again, and as you say, you see and you experience the effects of these acts, these thoughts, and these words on other people. Let me just give you one brief example to illustrate this. I have a friend who, when growing up, was kind of a roughneck. He had a hot temper, and he was always getting into scrapes. And one day, he was driving in his truck through the suburb in the town where he lived, and he almost hit a pedestrian. And he got very aggravated at this pedestrian, and he was a very big physical guy, still is. And a fight ensued, and he punched this guy out and left him unconscious on the pavement, got back into his truck and roared off. 15 years later, this guy has a near-death experience. Oddly enough, it was caused by an accident in regard to his own truck at that time. But in any event, he has a near-death experience, and during the near-death experience, he has a life review. And in his life review, this particular scene of the fight takes place again, comes up in his life review. And he said that, as many people do, he kind of experienced this from a dual aspect. There was a part of him that was almost as if he were high up in a building, looking through a window and seeing the fight below. But at the same time he was observing the fight like a spectator, he found himself in the fight, except this time he found himself in the role of the other person. And he felt all 32 blows that he had rained on this person originally 15 years ago now being inflicted upon himself. He felt his teeth cracking. He felt the blood in his teeth. He felt everything that this other person must have felt at that particular time. It was a complete role reversal, an empathic life review experience. And this is the sort of thing that many people report. And when they report these kinds of experiences, they realize that in our life, we are the very people that we hurt. We are the very people that we help to feel good. And we experience these actions as though done to ourselves in the life review. So that when people start talking about the golden rule in the context of the near-death experience, the golden rule is not just a precept for moral conduct, it's the way it works. And you experience this during the life review. And you learn that lesson in a very forcible way as a result of going through this kind of experience. And that's why when people have NDEs, they change as much as they do. Because if you can even imagine what it must be like to go through your entire life and see everything that you've ever done without judgment, but from a kind of almost omniscient point of view with regard to the effects of those actions, and see what your actions do to other people, it's a heavy kind of lesson, and it's something that stays with you, and it informs your conduct for the time after your near-death experience.
The implications of what you're saying are just enormous. It touches on ethics, it touches on theology, it touches on psychology. It goes, I think, it just rips the whole field of psychology apart to try and grasp something like that that cannot be contained within a single academic discipline.
No.
It's reminiscent to me of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth.
Well, I think a lot of the aspects of the near-death experience do burst our understanding of what's possible in science. I mean, how is it possible that in one instant outside of time, your entire life can be laid there before you, and you can experience everything in terms of the effects on other people and come back with that particular understanding? It's not possible, and yet it happens. It doesn't happen in just a few cases. It happens repeatedly to people. So it does give us a lot to think about, and that's why I say in my book, Lessons from the Light, the near-death experience isn't given just to those who have the experience. It's given to all of us to learn from, because all of us can profit by the lessons that near-death experiences learn in the course of the life review or other aspects of their experience, and we can grow from these lessons, and we can apply these lessons into our daily life.
I have to think that people watching this program right now must feel very moved learning about this.
Well, I like to think that they at least would ponder this, and one of the things that I've done in some of my classes and some of my workshops is I don't necessarily have to take it from my book. You can go to almost any book on the near-death experience that talks about the life review and cull similar examples. But I take about a half a dozen of these stories, like the one that I just related to you about the guy getting into that fight. And I ask people to read these stories very slowly in an almost meditative way, and then to reflect on them. And then after they do this for perhaps 10 minutes, I ask them to complete the following sentence. When I reflect on these commentaries in relationship to my own life, comma, and when people have that stem of the sentence, and they begin to, and they have this kind of information, it's a very, very powerful exercise. I've seen people weep in terms of some of the realizations that they come to, and I often have people then discuss the insights that they get. And this is one of the ways that people can put the near-death experience to work in their own lives, simply by taking these accounts and by, in a sense, internalizing them and realizing that, yeah, this is going to be your experience. I mean, if this is on the level, if we are really going to experience when we die what our entire lives have been about and our effects on others, it will make us very reflective. And as some of the near-death experiencers that I've talked with who have had this experience have told me, they now think ahead of time. They almost like do a little processing. They say, how do I want to see this particular scene in my life review? And so they use this information not just in a retrospective sense of how they've actually acted, but as a way to program or rehearse certain kinds of actions, because they can anticipate that they're going to be experiencing this from all sides, not just from their own ego-invested side.
It makes me think that it would be much easier for me to forgive other people for various behaviors that I'm judgmental about, knowing that they're going to inevitably experience the consequences of their behavior.
Yeah, I think one of the things that the near-death experience does, and even reading or hearing about it does, is it tends to increase your compassion and your understanding of other people. You know, and one of the things that happens in the near-death experience is people are not judged. There is no sense of external judgment, and when people are responded to that way in the